One God, amen. Glory be to Jesus Christ. Um, it's good to be here. When I come to St. Paul, I feel like, when my daughter was 2.5 years old, she'd come with a lot of scribbles, and I didn't know quite what it was. And I'd go, "Oh, you did such an amazing job. I see how you drew these colors here, and you put the red and the green together." Um, and in many ways, like whenever I present, I see a lot of men here that are inspiration for me, people I look up to as like a little child presenting something to them, and they go, "Okay, good job. Next time we'll actually know what in the world you're talking about." But it's I'm grateful to be here. I want to talk to you about family rituals. Just sort of get into what do we mean by rituals, and why is this topic even important? And then I want to give you 5 practical ways in which we can actually engage in these family rituals. When we're talking about rituals in a general sense, we're talking about consistent symbolic action that convey meaning beyond the act itself, right? And so if someone who's never been to an Orthodox church or just a church in general walked in, they sort of observe that you guys are singing. At some point you eat some food and you leave. But you have a deeper understanding of what's happening. For you, it's entering into a mystery of Christ. You'll hear that, for example, the response in the 150 Psalm is not that Christ was born, but Christ is born. Because we're not commemorating something that happened 2,000 years ago, we're entering into a mystery that's happening now. So Christ is born, Christ is crucified, Christ is resurrected today. Say, today Christ is resurrected. So it's a mystery that we enter into through the act of worship that we're doing. And family rituals are sort of like that. They're different from habits because they're not just like brushing your teeth or sort of putting on your shoes. They're things that you do repetitively, but they have deeper meaning, deeper significance that we extract purpose and meaning and virtue from. And so some of the things that I share with you, they're things that you are already doing. We're just wanting to expand what they mean just a little bit with whatever time that we have together. So rituals are consistent symbolic actions that convey meaning beyond the act itself. And these sort of rituals or rites for celebrating, for example, the Eucharist, the morning, evening offering of incense, they sort of give us a framework to understand family rituals as they connect us to meaning and purpose. Now, if we wanted to take it a step further, we can say, and we can't spend a lot of time on this, so I'm going to try to just say this in like 20 seconds. How do we make these rituals that we engage with at home liturgical? Remember, liturgy is the work of the people, but when we make something liturgical, we mean we're offering back to God what He's given to us with thanksgiving, right? So if this was sort of first century Christianity, people would walk in with a bag of wheat and oil and maybe bringing in a sheep and a lamb, and we're saying, "God, these things you have given to us, we're going to give it back to you as bread and wine and offering and so on, and you'll bless it and give it back to us." And we're in this continual offering back to God what He's given to us with thanksgiving. So we make daily life, the rituals that we engage with, the rituals that we'll talk about briefly, liturgical when, one, we're offering back to God what's His with thanksgiving. And the second thing that we do, according to Father Alexander Schmemann, is that we consciously bring Christ into the present moment. So I can meet with a good friend for coffee and we're talking about stuff, but in the very moment that he and I have the intention to make Christ present among us, we make this moment liturgical. we make it a blessed moment, a sanctified moment. And we can have moments like that sprinkled throughout all our family life. There's a book that I think I mentioned before. This is written by William Doherty, called The Intentional Family. And one of the things that he said, and this book was written about 20 years ago, one of the things that he said in this book is that we have the highest expectation around family life with very, very little scarce resources on how to actually sort of succeed in family life. Oftentimes what we're thinking about how we can grow personally, whether it's spiritually, professionally, financially, and then relationally, we would think about our marriage and how to sort of have that in track, because we have this hierarchy, right? Like, I got to get it right with God, my spouse, and then my children. And if that hierarchy is messed up, things get messed up. If I'm not right with God, I come into the marriage with a whole bunch of guilt and shame and stuff, and it bleeds into the marriage. And if things are not going right with my wife and I, right, we can't present ourselves in front of the children in a way that seems to be consistent, congruent, and meaningful. And so we have this hierarchy, and what William Doherty is saying, like, all these like extra expectation in modern family is placed on them with very little sort of know-how to sort of navigate these challenges. So it's easy, I guess what I'm saying is that it's easy to lose focus and purpose sort of in the everyday sort of drudgery of life. He talks about this drift, right? So this is 20 years ago, and he's saying that his research suggests that 70% of families do not eat dinner together. And it's not hard to believe, and I think I tried to look into it, and the statistics haven't changed all that much. Maybe 1 or 2 out of 10 families actually eat dinner together. And we'll talk about why that's significant for families to eat dinner together. I came across this study, which came out of Georgetown University. Study was conducted last year, and it looked at, of those who are raised in Catholic families, children who are raised by Catholic families, how many of those children grow up to actually be, quote unquote, practicing Catholics? And the number was 15. And that's not 50, 15, 1-5. I don't know of sort of a parallel research that has happened in the Eastern Orthodox Church or in the Oriental Orthodox Church, but I could tell you that in the Eastern Orthodox Church, they don't fare much better. I mean, when you go to a lot of the Eastern Orthodox churches, I mean, a lot of the people who are attending liturgy are probably over the age of 45, 50 years old. There's not a lot of youth there. So I wanted to look into the why. Why don't children actually stick around as they become adults? And one of the things that came out of the study was that families who successfully raised all their children to be faithful adults viewed prayer and service within the home as the primary and most important way to live out their faith. That these families became effective in passing on faith to the next generation to the degree that the children felt that the faith was a source of warmth in the home. Now, one of the ways that we use even the word warmth, right, even especially as men, right, we go, well, don't expect me to be warm and fuzzy, right? We put warm and fuzzy together in sort of a negative connotation. But when you ask people, who's been your spiritual father, right? And people will say, well, so Abuna so-and-so. And you'll say, well, why? And usually it's not, they don't say something like, well, it's because his preaching is because he's very well learned, is because he's theologically minded, or, I mean, some people do, but typically that's not what they say. And what they say has to do with this. It has to do with warmth. It has to do, and maybe other people might use the word love, but it has to do with how that spiritual father actually embraces the person, right? How he greets them, how he hugs them, how he shows up for him. And it does have to do with warmth. And I think one of the challenges is sometimes we can make faith sort of like right thinking, right? We go orthodoxy, right thinking. If I correct the wrong thinking, then my child will not veer off in the wrong direction. And so we make it very intellectualized and less sort of interpersonal, less humanized. The other thing that the research suggests is that the faith wasn't just something they went on and did on Sunday morning. Their faith was present in the household. It was present every day. It came out of conversations about everything pertaining to the home. And so whatever it is they did was whatever it is that they did in the home was what actually was the greater marker for sustaining faith over a long period of time. And if you read the book Atomic Habits, he sort of makes this point where he says, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And systems here, we can say, are rituals, are just things that you actually do daily. Because we can have very lofty spiritual dreams for ourselves and our children, but unless we have some basic ways of aligning those core beliefs with daily practices in our domestic life, they just continue to be dreams. Dostoevsky has something really beautiful that he says about this, but I think I'll share it with you in later slides. But what Dostoevsky has to say is deeply connected to this idea. The difference between lofty dreams and then like having a practical way of practicing the faith daily. So here are some things that we want to run through, because I know I don't have a lot of time. Here are 5 rituals that you already do, and we just want to expand a little bit about meaning. Probably time won't allow us to get through all 5, but we'll do what we can. You could just tell me when to shut up by raising your hand. So the first one that we want to talk about is family meals. Family meals. This is something I think most of us, hopefully, we come together at least once a day during dinner, and we have a meal together. And I have a 5-year-old and I have a 1-year-old. So part of dinner time is observing food going flying, right? Like my son will have like some whatever chicken and vegetable, and as soon as we put it down, sometimes it goes, you'll see it flying, right? And then you'll hear the 5-year-old like, oh, not pasta, I don't want pasta again, right? So I just given you sort of like a context. Maybe you have like older sort of children who are mature and sane, and that doesn't happen. But just giving you a context. But what's happening at dinner time and what we should sort of orient ourselves to is there something Eucharistic happening here? And what I mean by that is that something on the table gave its life, right? Whether we're eating fish, poultry, whatever, something gave its life in order to give us sustenance. And so there's something sacred about that, approaching the table in this way. And it's a way of sort of orienting oneself to approach dinner time with thanksgiving. I'm around people who I love, and we're engaging in something sacramental that something died in order to give us life, and this is from the Lord's hand. The other thing that we do during dinner time is that it's not so much about the structure, but the relationship within the structure. Right? You can have dinner every day together, and it's negative, it's a source of disconnection and breeds resentment. Or we can go into dinner time with the intention of relationship building. And so we're sitting around the table, and sometimes there's certain things that could help with that. especially if you have sort of adolescents who are just sort of like one word answer kind of people, like how are things going? Fine, is there more you want to share? No. What I found, one of the servants in the church I attend, she told me, have you ever used table topics during dinner? And I said, no, what is it? And so I looked online and I purchased it, and I started this when my daughter was 2.5, and they're just a series of prompts, questions, and then everybody gets to answer. And what I love about this is that kids get to learn how to tune in and listen. They learn how to take turns. They learn how to practice self-discipline, because you can't just blurt out what you want because your sibling is speaking. And so in a practical way, it teaches a lot of beautiful things. And then it teaches kids how to be more curious about other people, which is really important. I don't know if you've ever been to a dinner with more sort of old-timers, like people in our parents' age. Sometimes they don't ask you anything. Not because they don't care about you, because they just don't know what to ask you. And so sometimes you have to kind of lead them. Hey, Dad, ask me about my work. Oh, thanks for asking. Okay, yeah, let me tell you. Sometimes it just doesn't occur, right? And so sometimes these things could be really helpful for us. The other things that's happening during dinner time is that we get to model how we respect differences. We get to model sort of how to manage difficult situation. And one of the ways that we do that is that we have this mindset: control me, lead others. And so if it's backwards, if I say control my children, then I'm going to be really, really frustrated. If I go into dinner and I say nobody's throwing food on the floor, first thing my son Noah is going to do is go boop, right? And so I go in with control me and then lead others, and that's I think a helpful way to think about this. The other thing that goes on in dinner is that we get to teach something really important about food and about our bodies. And this is really important because our relationship to our food and our bodies are really, really important themes that carry on throughout the whole lifespan. And so as a clinician, anytime that I have worked with someone, for example, with an eating disorder, they've said, if this was a female, at some point she heard mom say, I hate eating this because it makes me fat, or I feel fat because of that. Or that's on one end of the spectrum. Another end of the spectrum is more food offered as way of being nurturing. Well, I'm really full. I was working with someone sort of living in the West, South rather, and he said this is sort of part of Southern hospitality, right? Is that you keep pouring on more and more and more and more. So I've lost touch with my hunger fullness cue. I don't know when to stop eating, and it's been a problem all my life, is that I don't have a good relationship with food. So this is a primary school for us, is that we get to relate to food in a way that's healthy. We don't demonize food. We don't call food, this is bad food, because if I'm eating bad food, I'm doing something bad. And then we begin to have an emotional relationship with food. I just ate this muffin that's bad, and now I feel bad, and now I'm thinking about bad. And one of the ways that this could get really distorted is obsession. I start thinking, I already left the dinner table and I'm obsessing about what I ate and how it makes me feel and what it does to my body and all this stuff. And then it becomes problematic. So this is one of the good ways to teach that all the food that's given to us is good. It's from the Lord. There's food that gives us energy and gives us strength and gives us focus. We want to choose that. And as the kids sort of grow up and mature more, then we could become like more sophisticated about talking about nutrition and what's helpful and what's not all that helpful for your goals. The research indicate that families who eat together regularly report higher levels of family satisfaction and better mental health in children. So people just do better when they have family dinners together. All right, the second ritual that we all probably engage in, and again want to just sort of expand our view of this, is family worship and prayer. And I was thinking about this, that one of the greatest gifts that I could give to my kids, or that you could give to your kids, is that your kids would actually turn to Christ in moments, all moments, in moments of happiness, in moments of sorrow, in moments of distress, in moments of grief, that they actually see Christ as a source, a constant source of comfort, of consolation. The other thing is, when we pray as a family, my father of confession at the time told me this, and I didn't listen to him. He said, when you get married and you stand up to pray, you should pray for your wife out loud. And hopefully your wife will pray for you out loud. And I never did this. I didn't do it for the first maybe decade of our marriage. But when the kids came, we started doing this. We started praying for each other out loud. And it's been such a source of love, of connection, of knowing more about the individual's inner world, like what really occupies your own inner world, and that comes out through prayer. The other thing that comes out through family prayer is like micro-dosing the understanding of suffering. So one of the things that happened during COVID, right, my daughter was maybe around 2.5, 3 years old, so we'd say like, pray for so-and-so. And she'd say, why? We'd say, well, she's sick and she's not with her children and she wants to go back home to be with her children. And she would pray for her, and the next day she'd pray for her and pray for her. And then during prayer, she turned around and said, Mom, how did God heal so-and-so? And then Mom said, no, Habibi, she went to heaven. Well, Mom, is that a good thing, or is that not good? Well, it's good and sad. And here's why it's good and here's why it's sad, because the kids don't get to see Mom for a long time. And I would have never thought about like sitting my 3-year-old down and saying, hey, let's talk about death. But it just naturally came out that way, and it was received very, very well. And I felt like this is the way that God can teach these things to us through prayer. I was looking at some of the saints and what they have to say about family prayer, and one of the saints in the Eastern Orthodox Church, Saint Paisios of Mount Athos, what he said was, like, when you pray with your kids, don't be annoying. He didn't say that, but he said, don't pressure the kids to pray for a long time than expected. I mean, I've been at friends' house and the kids are pulling out their Ekbeh and they're praying, and I'm thinking, this is long for me. Like, your kids do this all the time. This is amazing. But whatever it is that your kids can handle should be good enough. If it's good enough for God, it should be good enough for you. The other thing is the constant correcting children during prayer. It's not uncommon that Noah's going to smack someone in the face or pull his sister's hair during prayer. And, we'll talk about it after prayer, but, that's the expectation for someone who's 1.5. We're going to take it for now. There's a little bit more expectation for the 5-year-old, but generally we try not to do a lot of correcting during prayer. We want it to be a time where they could spontaneously show up, be with God, be with family, pray for each other, and for that to be a connecting time. The other thing is, I risk just running out of time, but we'll do this. One of the beautiful things that I like in the Eastern Orthodox Church is that when you enter into the door, there's an icon. There's an icon there, and what people do is that they physically kiss the icon in ways of venerating the icon. We sort of do this hand-to-mouth type of thing, Even with the greet with another with the holy kiss in liturgy, I remember one of the contemporary sort of modern saints criticizing this, the way that we greet one another. It just sort of lacks sort of intimacy and deeper connection. But going back to the icons, what I really like about this is, as someone begins to learn about a saint and become inspired by the life of the saint, it's beautiful that they could begin to show physical affection to that saint in gratitude of the ways that they have inspired them. And I like this because at some point our kids will just become so grandiose. And for some, they're just going to become so smart that they're going to realize that God can't possibly exist, and rationally will reject him. But what I like this is that the whole person, right, the intellect only sort of relates to God in partial part. It's not all of it, right? And when you develop sort of a more deeper soul connection to the spiritual life, even if it's at some point intellectually you misfire and sort of draw yourself away, you come back to this sort of soul connection that you've created through these rituals. We'll do maybe one more. Another ritual that we can be thinking about implementing in our family life is that of gratitude, family gratitude rituals. I mean, we could talk about this for a very long time, but there is a type of therapy called narrative therapy. And narrative therapy says that the stories we tell about our lives create the lives that we live. And so if I began to say, like, here's all the bad things that happened to me last week, and people just, this guy cut me off, and this happened, I began to feel victimized by people around me, and I create what we call like problem-saturated stories, right, that lead to a life where I feel helpless and I feel weak. So even from a psychological level, it's really important to be able to scan, to see what is God doing for me? How is God showing up for me in my life? There's that, and then the other issue is that, I was listening to one podcast one time, and the psychologist says a lot of our children are born in a candy shop. And what she meant by that is, if you go to a child who's never had chocolate before, and you go, here's a piece of chocolate, and they taste it, and they go, oh, this is amazing, this is marvelous, I love this, thank you. But if you have a child who's born in a candy shop, right, you go, you want a piece of chocolate, they're like, maybe not, we'll see, it's not a big deal. They can't really receive it with a lot of gratitude. And a lot of our children grow up with a lot of resources. So how is it that you cultivate this sense of gratitude, that everything we have is a gift from God, and we should receive it with thanksgiving? That's going to be, I think, a challenge for us as parents. This is not going to be an easy thing, I don't think. One of the beautiful things that's in the book Time and Despondency by Dr. Nicole Rokas is that she says, as soon as we offer thanks for anything or anyone, we reach outside of ourselves. We connect ourselves to the blessings God has surrounded us with. In doing so, we lay hold of a new, transfigured way of being in the world. So living with gratitude is a new, transfigured way of being in the world, one that reveals our basic need for and delight in the grace and mercy of God. And so one of the practical ways that I like to sort of do this is during dinner time, bedtime, right to school, whenever we can, I'll just ask my child, like, what's 5 things you're grateful for? What's 2 things you're grateful for? What are you grateful that happened today? And then when I'm sending her off to school, I like to tell her, hey, by the way, today I want you to notice what Jesus is doing for you, and then I want you to come back and I want you to tell me, And just this past Friday, my daughter came and she said, you didn't ask me about my homework. And I said, well, you don't have homework on Friday. She said, no, the other homework. And I said, oh, yes, tell me, what did Jesus do for you today, right? And it's just sort of orienting her to put on this lens that I'm fishing for the good things that God is doing in my life. And that's something that you continue doing for the rest of your life. It's a deep shift in mindset. I think it'd probably be good to stop here. Any thoughts, corrections? Yeah, I think we'll come. God willing, I could come back and do the other 2 at another time. Anything that you want to add or sort of? Yeah. The Intentional Family by William Doherty. Doherty. Yeah. Anything else? All right. Thank you. Peter. Okay.
Hear us as we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.